Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always by Nick, my co-host Nick Filato. And today the nightmare is finally over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Damn.
But I knew that.
Well, the nightmare is finally over, Dan, because you're able to get a nice smooth shave because of Manscaped. Use the code Big Blue to get 20% off plus free shipping from Manscaped. And that's the nightmare Dan was referring to. There's nothing else that's impactful that's happened in Giants land. Is there, Dan?
Well, we're doing a quick podcast, emergency pod on the Giants' decision to release Daniel Jones. John Mara, Giants president, released a statement today that said, look, Daniel Jones came to me this morning and he asked for his release. So we granted him his release. This doesn't benefit the Giants in any way to release Daniel Jones. It could ultimately hurt the Giants by giving another team an advantage, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Brian Daboll today said he was surprised by this. He thought that, I guess, I'm surprised why he's surprised, Nick, but Daboll was surprised. He thought Daniel Jones would just take the scout team and just run with it. But I'm not surprised by it. Daniel Jones is a competitor, and he wants an opportunity to sign with another team where he's not just going to be a scout team safety QB4.
The scout team thing is overblown, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, hey, Daniel Jones, you're on scout team now. Get over there, you freaking loser, like the media is trying to make it to be. I think it was like in an install period where they just needed somebody to stand there. It's not like he's like taking drops and trying to like knock passes away necessarily on scout team or trying to be competitive in that nature. He's just occupying a space because he's not the first team quarterback. That's at least my read on the situation, but it's great for like media to grab it and shit on a team that's already kick them while they're down. And maybe they deserve to be kicked, but I think this one's overblown. Personally.
And I think you're right on that. I think, though, this played a major factor in the Giants' decision ultimately to grant him his release. Now, I think the Giants are a stand-up organization, despite what a lot of people might say, and they would have granted his release no matter what. But anyone who was on Giants Twitter or, reading articles or anything yesterday knew that this was becoming a major distraction for the team immediately within the first 24 hours, right? You had, 33 articles from Pat Leonard on the same topic yesterday. Between yet in the last 24 hours, I think I've seen legitimately 5 articles by Pat Leonard saying the same thing, culminating with him saying the Giants are pushing out the door like a legend. It's almost like you're talking about him like a legend, like they're the stand-up guy. They're pushing out the door. Like you knew at that point when it started to get media frenzy like that, they had to do something. They couldn't just, they're trying to run a football team here, Nick. They're trying to win games down the stretch. And having a distraction like that where the media is going to write about him every week. They're going to ask DeVito about DJ every week. They're going to ask Locke about DJ every week. They're going to ask neighbors about DJ every week. Every single player is going to have to answer these questions about a player who is benched and who is not going to play again for the rest of the season, is essentially cut by all means without actually being cut. So it doesn't surprise me that the Giants viewed this for them as mutually beneficial as well, so they can get rid of this. And within a week or two, I think we're going to finally be at the end of having to even reference Daniel Jones. At least these media members, I don't know how they're going to cover it the rest of the season. I assume they're going to be done with it, Pat Leonard and the likes. They're going to have to, focus on something else. I'm sure for Leonard, he'll, go into Daboll's a disaster, the locker room's a disaster, Shane's a disaster, because, that's how he does his business, and that's fine. That's his way of life. I'm not trying to disparage him. I'm sorry, Nick. I know you don't love this stuff, but I do what I do, and it is what it is. That's how I feel about it. And I finally snapped on one of his posts today with a reply because it's enough.
Oh, that's where this is coming from. I knew there had to be an impetus to why you're just out.
Enough is enough at this point. He's like, they're pushing a legend out the door. They're treating him so poorly. It's unbelievable. Like, come on. Let's get a grip. Like, of the situation. And I'm not going to get too much more into that. You can find it on Twitter if you want to see what I said. But the Giants have made a decision that I think is fair to Daniel Jones and really helpful to him. And at this point, Nick, now, as far as what this podcast is about, as you'll see in the title and the headline of this podcast, we're actually going to have somebody on a little bit who knows so much more about the cap in this specific situation than us to kind of break down what this means for the Giants salary cap. So we're not going to get into cap stuff yet, but I will say this, as far as Daniel Jones goes, Nick, and what this means for him rest of season, there's some interesting aspects to it. The first being this, because the Giants released Daniel Jones, Nick, he will most likely, I'll say it's a 99.9% chance, become a free agent, because the only way he's going to go to waivers and someone would have to pick up that contract. No one is picking up that contract. No one in their right minds would pick up that contract. The Giants were the only team to ever pick up that contract. So that's done. He will go through waivers and he'll become a free agent. And why that's interesting to me, Nick, is whoever signs him now as a free agent, if they sign him to a 1 year, whatever, minimum type deal, he plays out the rest of the season with that team, bench or plays. When he becomes a free agent this offseason, if he signs with another team, that team that signed him this season will get a compensatory pick formula. We'll get something with a compensatory pick formula. So they'll get a compensatory credit, right? Like, so let's say the Cowboys sign him now, or the Ravens, 2 teams that are known for using the comp pick formula well. If they sign him now, he becomes free agent, and he signs like a multi-year deal with Carolina, let's say in the offseason, that team, the Cowboys, if they sign him now, get credit from a comp pick formula. Now, don't knock the Giants just yet, because I know some fans will hear that and be like, are you kidding me? The Giants could have been this team that gets the comp pick card. No, because the Giants wouldn't have gotten a comp pick credit for Jones, because we would be releasing him this offseason. He wouldn't be leaving as a free agent. The team that is going to lose him this offseason that signs him now is going to be losing him as a free agent. So they are the ones who get the comp pick formula, which is also another example of how the Giants helped Daniel Jones here and did the right thing by Jones. This doesn't help the Giants. It gives another team an advantage. It gives them
it allows the Giants to get away from the media madness now and the distraction that is Daniel Jones, which is certainly helping them.
Yeah. So I just want to bring that up. So your thoughts on that, and maybe let's go into the more fun one that I think you'll have thoughts on. Daniel Jeremiah had a tweet, and I thought it was interesting. He says Daniel Jones has 2 options right now. Option number 1 is you sign with a team that needs a quarterback right now, and he calls it a audition without a rehearsal. I love how he says that, right? Quarterback coming into a new system, no rapport with the receivers, nothing. And he's going to just be thrown out to the fire. Similar to what we saw a couple seasons ago with Baker Mayfield. Remember when he signed with the Rams?
Yeah.
Kind of got an audition there. Actually did well in his audition with the Rams. So a little bit against what Jeremiah says. Or option 2, he signs with a team that has a great coach, has a great infrastructure at quarterback. He can soak up and sponge a playoff team. He can soak up and sponge all the information he gets and then hit the market. If you're Jones right now, Nick, which option are you choosing? And if you're choosing option 2, which teams are you looking at?
If I'm choosing, I think I would go with option 2. I think you need a reset at this moment. You need a rewiring of your mind, of your quarterbacking skill. You need to be taught a different way. And I think going to a quarterback guru and a stable situation, which, to be frank, although I am not a believer in Daniel Jones's skill set and the ceiling, he has not been in a stable situation. It has been dysfunctional around the parts of the New York Giants over the last half decade or so, basically since Daniel Jones arrived here. So I think if he went to a more stable environment, it would benefit Daniel Jones. And the team that really comes to mind is the 49ers. Now, is Shanahan and Purdy in that quarterback room, do they need him? Who's behind Brock Purdy? Brandon Allen? I would imagine Daniel Jones has more upside than a player like Brandon Allen. So would that make sense for Shanahan? I'm a little uncertain, but I think someone like that, maybe the Vikings at this point, who's behind Sam Darnold? Nick Mullins? No, probably not, because Nick Mullins is, I think, solid enough and knows that system well enough. So I'm looking at the coaches in the league, Dan, that I have a lot of respect for when it comes to coaching quarterbacks who could use a Daniel Jones. And then there is, and this system is different, but it is the Miami Dolphins. It's a branch off of Kyle Shanahan. And we saw what happened with the Dolphins when Tua left, when Tua was injured. They didn't have a backup quarterback, but are the Dolphins in a position right now to bring Daniel Jones in? Are they even competing? So there's still a lot that needs to be sussed out and figured out with that. But that to me is the best option, because on the flip side of it, Dan, what are we really looking at? What are the teams that are bringing him in and starting him right now and giving him that, 2022 Rams experience for Baker Mayfield? It would be the Carolina Panthers, who have Bryce Young. They probably want to see what they still have in Bryce Young. He's on a 2-game winning streak at this point, unless he lost it, but he was on a 2-game winning streak. And then the Dallas Cowboys within the division, like, the Jerry Jones going to do that? I wouldn't be shocked if they did. And then there's the Eagles for the other argument. They bring him in, but they have Kenny Pickett. And the only reason why I bring that up is because I think it's something Howie Roseman would do. He's best friends with Saquon Barkley, but financially, would you make that work? Do you believe enough in Kenny Pickett's skill set? All that kind of jazz. But at least Pickett and Jones, I think Jones is better than Kenny Pickett, or at least they're comparable. So could that be an upgrade that someone like Howie would love to, hold over the head of the New York Giants, to embarrass the New York Giants, just like they kind of have with this whole Saquon situation, just how it's unfolded, not necessarily the Giants' decision-making and how it's perceived via the media, if you know what I'm saying. So I think there are plenty of options, but to me, it's certainly sit behind somebody who knows the system, learn that system, and then try to test the market later on a 1-year deal and compete for a starting position.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Nick, because I think I'm with you 100%. I like option 2 for Jones, and so did Daniel Jeremiah. I don't think it's even a debate. You're better off if you're Jones not trying to jump into a situation where you can play right away. The funny thing, though, is some of those situations you mentioned, Nick, he might have to play at some point, right? Like Miami, for example. Tua Tagovailoa, one more concussion, he's done for the year, right? And that's it. I did never pronounce that name right. Another one, San Francisco, right? Look, Brock Purdy at practice yesterday couldn't even throw a football. I don't know what the hell that means. I'm not happy about that, though, as somebody who has Brock Purdy in my main home league and has like tons of 49ers in fantasy, Nick. I am very worried about that situation, but he may have to play there too because Brandon Allen is not a NFL's caliber quarterback. And we've seen that by when the Giants annoyingly beat them that year. And we were told how good Joe Judge was and how this team was building culture. But, and I'm sorry to bring that back in, but look, he has options, Nick. I think the best one for him is going to a Shanahan.
The Jets?
Yeah, the Jets. It's another one. I've seen that Photoshop jersey of Daniel Jones in a Jets uniform. That's unbelievable.
I don't know if he'd be able to get 8, though, you know?
I don't even want to talk about this right now, but I also saw something yesterday that an insider believes that when the Jets cut Rodgers this offseason, the Giants are a team to watch, which because he's living here now and Montclair, he has that house he just bought. That's interesting. So many reasons. At 42, he barely can move. He sucks so bad this year, but
it's terrible.
Look, for Jones, to me, I feel like, and I agree with you, I don't think it needs to be said, but I'm not a believer in his skill set, but I've always felt like the best system for him is a Shanahan-based system. That to me is something that just watching him for this many years, Nick, 6 years of tape on Jones, I felt like, a system that's going to be run heavy, play action based, and, mostly just hit your back foot and rip it, very easy to find reads. It's a Jimmy. And now Brock Purdy's taking that to another level because he goes through the progressions and all the stats show it. He's brought that pass offense, something that's never had. Tua also is very good in that regard, throws anticipation, brings that offense to a different level. But it's a more defined offense, which is what I think Daniel Jones needs without a doubt. Obviously, we know he has processing issues. So to me, his best bet is sign with San Francisco and learn under Kyle Shanahan. Look at what it did for Sam Darnold, right? Like Sam Darnold got that time spent with Shanahan and the 49ers, and he looks like a totally different quarterback. And I think Jones can look at that example and use that for him and say, this is my place to go. So I'm hopeful for him that he signs with San Francisco. I'll say this. I know a lot of people will probably not feel this way, but I do hope for his sake that he has success somewhere else. And I won't look at it like, oh, we were so wrong with Daniel Jones. Like, what happened? Because we gave him 6 years of chances here. Like, it wasn't going to work with the Giants, no matter what you did, no matter who you brought in, it just wasn't going to work here. But that doesn't mean it can't definitely not work anywhere. I don't personally believe it will. I think if you don't throw with anticipation and you're as poor of an anticipatory thrower and processor as Jones, you have no chance to have sustained success in the NFL. But if he's going to do it anywhere, it might be good for him to learn under Shanahan. That's like the best option to me. But Miami's interesting too. But for me, it would be San Fran. That's where, if I'm Jones and his agent, that's where I'm looking.
He goes right back to the playoffs too, right?
Yeah, then he gets to be a part of a playoff team.
And you're right. He might have utility for that team if he can get adjusted to that roster. I don't know what's going on with Brock Purdy right now. That's still a very new situation. So they might be able to use him if he's a significant upgrade over Brandon Allen. I'm not certain that he is, but that makes sense. The 49ers. I'm trying to think of another team that's popping in my mind.
The Eagles one's interesting to you by you because of the Barkley wrinkle, right? He's best friends with Saquon Barkley, good friends with Saquon Barkley. That's an easy transition for him from a locker room standpoint. And he's going to bring something, he's a good locker room guy, Jones. I think that's clear to us. It should have been clear to us the whole time. And Nick and I have been saying that for years. First one in the door, last one out, great work ethic. All his teammates love him. He puts his body on the line. We've been saying that for 6 years. And yesterday, what we saw yesterday with his emotional presser and what Dexter Lawrence and these players are saying about him confirmed all of that he is a good fit for any locker room. So for the Eagles, a team going to the playoffs that already has Barkley, I think that's an easy locker room fit for him.
It's an easy locker room fit, but it's also just an ability by the Eagles brass and front office to embarrass the New York Giants, a division rival, and keep them down. And if you're a player in the Giants locker room and you see Saquon leave and you see the success Saquon has had, that leaves an imprint on the player, especially when you're toiling away in this pathetic existence that is the 2024 season for the New York Giants. And now the starting quarterback, the guy that this locker room still seems to rally around, is a member of the Eagles. That does not reflect well on the Giants organization. And people within that locker room are going to look at the Philadelphia Eagles and be like, my guys are over there, man. Those were the leaders of that 2022 team that we hold in high esteem. Now they're both Philadelphia Eagles. I think this is a moment that Howie Roseman might look at and say, let's bring him in. It really does depend on Kenny Pickett and how they feel about Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee to some level. But if they can get Daniel Jones very cheap, for basically nothing, and just bring him in and be a backup behind Jalen Hurts, who I think he could fit that system. That system's not necessarily predicated on on these advanced X's and O's, this quick timing, which I think he can fit, but it's more just matchup based and take advantage of those matchup, diagnose pre-snap to post-snap and make your decision. I think Jones could have success, relatively speaking, because of the environment that he's within. That's kind of the whole Jalen Hurts argument, right? People criticize Jalen Hurts' overall quarterbacking skill, but he has such a good offensive line, and he has the weapons, and he has all the X, Y, and he has the Z. Can Daniel Jones at least do that to a lesser level? Perhaps. It's just, does Howie Roseman view him as an upgrade over Kenny Pickett, and is that worth the optics of absolutely throwing the New York Giants, a divisional rival, under the bus, like basically planting a cancer in the locker room, dude? That's kind of what I think it could be.
It could be, but I think, I see all that, but I don't view Jones as like a vendetta type of guy against the Giants.
It's not. It wouldn't be a Jones thing. It would be more so the Eagles are going to the playoffs. The Eagles are having all this success, and the Giants are like, oh, well, we have 2 wins this season. Oh, let's look over there and see Saquon and Daniel. Oh, those are our leaders from a couple. Oh, hey, guys, how are you doing? And they're going to the playoffs, and they're having a great time. And the Giants locker room is looking around like, well, this sucks. Like, what the hell? Right. That's such a better environment to be in. No free agent is going to want to come to the New York Giants if that's the case, too. It's not a great reflection of the overall culture of the New York Giants if players are on a division rival having success and they've been claimed as castaways from the New York Giants, which is, I think, how this could be viewed by some of the people within the locker room.
I don't think you're wrong about that, Nick. I just think from his standpoint, Jones, what he should be focused on, and I hope for his sake he is, and I think he will be, is how do I get my career back on track as a starter in the 100%. NFL? And yeah, he'll have a fun time in Philadelphia, and I think he will be a fun part of that locker room in the playoffs. But I'm not really believing in Kellen Moore helping turn around his career. If he goes to San Fran, I've kind of seen it. If I'm him, I've kind of seen it already with Sam Darnold. He can coach him to soak up all that information and figure out a different way to process the field, because he needs that, man. Like, the number one thing Jones needs is a better way to pre to post snap see the field.
Yeah, you're talking about an X's and O's snap. Absolutely. Yeah. So it really does come down to would a team like the 49ers even be interested in him? Right. And that's and if they're not, and a team like the Eagles come a calling, then maybe you go there.
Right.
But again, like, I don't know how much he's going to grow as a quarterback if he goes to a team like the Eagles, but he will be joining his best friend there. And again, it would not reflect well on the Giants organization, which seems to be the common denominator with anything that has to do with this organization over the last half decade plus.
One more topic to touch on before we get to Mason, who's going to come in and help us break down the cap implications of this Jones signing. This is one I wanted to run by you, Nick, since I saw it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Releasing. You said signing.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, releasing Daniel Jones. This is one I've wanted to go over with you since I saw this quote. And then I saw it yesterday from Paul Dottino, and now I have the full quote from Art Stapleton today. So Art Stapleton tweeted, Malik Neighbors told, why is Brian Daboll going to Tommy DeVito in place of Daniel Jones? Malik Neighbors told us yesterday without meaning to tell us yesterday. This is from Art Stapleton. Here's the quote. This is from Malik Neighbors. Neighbors said, Tommy DeVito's intention with the ball is precise. He's able to deliver the ball before you get out of your break. So Daboll told me, make sure you get your head around pretty fast because the ball's going to be coming. So that's my main focus. It's just getting my head around. He's going to be throwing the ball before I get out of my break. So just having that as a quarterback for anticipation for him to throw the ball before you get out of your break, that's what we need. That's from Malik Neighbors. Your thoughts on that quote?
It makes sense. Tommy DeVito has a quicker release, and Daniel Jones held on to the football a little bit more. I think Malik Neighbors is excited about a refreshing change in scenery without having Daniel Jones there being a little bit more indecisive. I think DeVito may be a little bit more decisive, and that quick release will also help. When he has an idea of what the coverage is going to be, he throws quicker, has a quicker release than Daniel Jones, which leads to anticipatory passing. So when it's like, okay, I have this defense figured out, get the football, okay, confirm, I have the coverage I want. That ball's coming out before the receiver is necessarily open. But it's not something that happens all of the time, but it happens more often than Daniel Jones. And I think this is something the coaching staff has acknowledged. It's something that it's not a surprise to any of us. The offense is going to change a little bit right now with Tommy DeVito, but that trait specifically will certainly help the Giants matriculate the football down the field.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I guess it's not a surprise. It's just a struggle for me that we've got to this point. I don't really understand it because to me, if you don't have anticipation in your passing game, it's just hard to move the ball. But let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the Giants cap. We're bringing on Mason now. So Nick, why don't you introduce me?
What's up? What's up, buddy? How you doing?
What's going on, gentlemen? Thank you for having me on. Can you hear me clear?
We hear you
We
clear,
got you,
Mason.
bud.
For those
Okay.
who do not know, this is Mason on Twitter. You can follow him. I'm looking at what is the at? Just give me the at right now, Mason.
NYG Mason.
NYG Mason. He is,
Yep.
I would say, the most renowned Twitter follow when it comes to the cap stuff. So you, Mason, have been on top of this cap situation since the Giants announced that Daniel Jones was not going to be the starting quarterback. You came out on Twitter and said, look, they can release him right now. And a lot of people pushed back on you, but then you laid out your case as to the cap ramifications or lack thereof of releasing him right now. So I wanted to give you this platform to tell our audience what exactly are the cap ramifications with releasing Daniel Jones right now. How are you reading this entire situation?
Well, to start with, I've been on this train since the offseason, and the reason why is I kind of saw the writing on the wall, right? I didn't think that Jones was going to make a, leaps and bounds, improvement in his processing, right? You can add weapons to an offense, and by default, the offense will get better, right? The major leap comes in that ability to process, right? And as you guys have, talked about for years, the processing wasn't there. So I wasn't expecting a major improvement, right? At the start of the season, I thought we were going to be a three-win team, right? And we're trending that way. And now we are where we are. So we're in a post-June 1 cut situation for 2024, right? The reason why it makes sense in 2024 is because you have guaranteed salary that's guaranteed to the player, and it would be essentially a cap-crushing move to do it as a pre-June 1 cut, because that's $70 million that accelerates onto this year's cap if we did it before, right? So $70 million for one player is about 30% of your cap, give or take, right? Plus all the other dead money that, teams carry on average as business as usual type stuff, right? So that's pretty, that's going to kill you, right? That's going to make a lot of things happen. So you do it now. It's cap neutral for this year because of the guaranteed salary. Next year, you save $19 million, right, against the cap because it accelerates into 2025. The dead money from 26 moves into 25, okay? Now, the reason why you don't wait until March 1st to do a post-June 1 designation is you don't get that money, those $31 million in cap savings until after June 1, right? So the problem is not only do you not get that money, it's now you're hamstrung if you want to make other moves and you got to push more money out into the future and do a couple other things. Instead, you would just cut them as a pre-June 1 cut in March, have access to the $19 million. And if you need another $11 million, push salary into 2025 for the $11 million, and there's your $30 million, and you have control of the whole situation from the onset, right? So instead of walking into free agency with $45 million in cap space, you're now walking in with 64 plus the ability to move 11 into 25 if you really needed it, right?
Hey everyone, with the holidays creeping up faster than your aunt's fruitcake recipe, I've got something way better to share with you. If you want to look sharp for all those festive gatherings and maybe finally win that best groomed at the family dinner award, check out the latest masterpiece from Manscaped, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Trust me, it's like Rudolph for your face, guiding you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trusted Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off plus free shipping. Think of Manscaped as your grooming superhero, the skin-safe 4-blade foil for when you want that baby's bottom smooth, and that skin-safe stubble trimmer for when you want to keep some stubble but clean it up a bit so you'll look good for the holidays. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. And you can have a similar experience. To get this new customer offer from Mint Mobile and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. That's 3 Bs. $45 payment upfront required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Look, we all wear underwear every single day, and we all have complaints. They ride up, they're not comfortable, they don't fit correctly. I shared these complaints until I started wearing Skims. When I tried Skims stretch boxer briefs, I felt like I finally found that missing link. They gave me all the movement I needed for the workout. They were comfortable while I was sitting here podcasting and watching all of this New York Giants film. Everything from the texture to the fit worked for me, and it will work for you too. It is a great product, and I highly recommend it. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows.
All right, Mason, let's actually break it down to a much more simplified manner for the audience and everything. What is the difference between the Giants releasing Daniel Jones today rather than releasing him at the start of the next year? Like we all expected the Giants to.
None.
There's zero difference. Okay. Yeah,
Zero difference.
That's what your tweets were showing all of us. So
right.
You were on this from basically the beginning that the Giants had this option in their back pocket if the 2024 season toiled away and fell apart and became this absolute abyss of misery that we're all suffering through right now.
Yep. And I was actually suggesting it before, he was even, essentially cleared, if you will, for the injury, because you can't file a grievance. Even if he tried to file a grievance, he would only be able to file a grievance for this year, right? And his salary was already guaranteed. If he was still injured next year, he still has a burden of proof. Article 45 of the CBA, if I remember correctly, he still has to continue working out and getting better to be able to claim that $23 million if he had been released, ahead of time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because he still has to be able to pass physicals and show that he's working out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the weird part with not only Jones but Tua is these are the first time we're seeing contracts with players that have injury guarantees into the future, right? So it's really kind of the first time this is being navigated by the NFL. So there's a lot of, okay, hey, how does this apply? What applies? What doesn't apply? And that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of gray area, right? Like with Tua, if they come back and they say, hey, so a doctor says you shouldn't play, right? Does that constitute the ability to retire medically or not, right? Then you start getting into a whole bunch of, legal mumbo jumbo with all that stuff that's, still to be, worked out.
So let's also bring it back to the fundamentals here. Now, just because there's misinformation on Twitter about this kind of shit. Now that Daniel Jones is cut, how does this affect the Giants cap moving forward into the next 2 seasons?
So if he signs with a team right now, we would get an offset of about $70,000 a game. Okay. Assuming he signs to the active roster, because the, average league minimum is probably somewhere around 1.1, 1.2 for him.
Wait, let me stop you for a second. Let me stop you for a second, Mason. Just want to clarify. If he signs with a team through waivers, or are you saying even if he passes through waivers, which we all know is guaranteed to happen, and then signs a free agent?
Okay, so if he's claimed off waivers, they claim the contract and all the terms of the contract, and the new team's on the hook for everything. That's not happening, right? So when he clears waivers, right, and the team. So great question there, Dan. When he clears waivers, we will get an offset for any amount that he signs on with another team for, which would be league minimum, which was exactly like the Russell Wilson situation this year, right? So that's why I was also on that train of, hey, sign Russell Wilson at 1.2, makes absolute sense to do it. We get a cap credit the following year because they have to adjust that on the books, the following year for the following season, right? So it's about $70,000 a game, so about $500,000 that would apply as a credit to next year.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Now it's likely that he might get claimed, go on a practice squad, what have you. What does that do? So the cap hit for the dead cap that the Giants are going to have to pay is what exactly with this move? And does that carry into 2026 at all? It's just rip the Band-Aid off in 2025. Just get very, very down to the most simplistic version of what this release actually entails for the Giants.
Okay, so we have a cap hit of $47 million for him this year.
Yes.
Cutting him doesn't change that. It's a cap neutral move, okay, for this year, right now. For 2025, it's the same as if he would have been cut pre-June 1 in 2025, saved $19 million, $22 million in dead money accelerating into 2024. So, because
what about 2026? Does this have any impact?
It's no, completely clean in 26.
So
essentially it's, yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify for the listeners, I believe this is correct. By cutting him now instead of making him a post June 1 cut, they're essentially taking all their medicine now, right? For 2025, essentially. Like they'll have a bigger dead cap hit then, but in 2026, they're done. They're cleared from the contract. They're free to go their way. Otherwise, they would have been able to spread it out over those 2 years.
Exactly. And as we already discussed, spreading it out over those 2 years doesn't make sense, right?
Right. This is the decision that there's no reason given where the state of the franchise is at right now in the team that they would want to spread it out for 2 years. They're not in a win now window in 2025, obviously.
Precisely.
Is there any other cap ramifications that you want to tell the New York Giants fan base about and use this platform to do so in regards to the Daniel Jones release, or maybe if there's other options that the Giants could pursue on the quarterback market or what have you as to how to create cap space or maybe find somebody cheap?
I mean, they've got, the ability to make some cap space off of, there's still some meat on Brian Burns' contract. I believe Andrew Thomas and Dex's contract still have some meat on them. Any contract that has about $5 million or more in base salary. So if you go to overthecap.com and you look at the base salaries, right? Anything that has $5 million or more will probably be able to make some space, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, that's usually kind of like the benchmark that I look for because, otherwise you're really looking at pennies, right? Yeah. We're not in a bad cap situation. It just kind of is what it is. It's more personnel management that led to where we are. That it is the actual structure of the contracts, right?
I think
it's making a decision to, had they hit on Daniel Jones, we would have been fine, right? We would have been fine. That's an important thing to understand here. But I wasn't pro contract, pro signing Daniel Jones or anything like that. I mean, the way I looked at it was, Derek Carr got released by the Raiders right before he was about to get, $35-40 million, guaranteed chunk of salary. And Derek Carr in 2023, to me, was still a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. Today, you could probably argue it away, but at that point in time, I mean, I'm trying to be politically, correct here, a little bit diplomatic. But at that time, he was let go. And essentially, if you think about it, he had the opportunity to go talk to the Saints, theoretically about a trade, but he's really talking his contract, right? And getting his terms hammered out. And because they knew that the Raiders weren't going to keep him on the books, right?
Yeah.
So if he's not worth $35 to $40 million on the books and no other team was trading for him on that contract, how did we get to a decision to give Daniel Jones $82 million over 2 years, right?
Right. And turned out to be even more because they restructured it, right? 90 something ultimately for the Giants.
No, it's still 82 because it was already off of the guaranteed money. We just added like probably about $10 million, about $5 million of dead money between next year and the fall and 25.
2026.
So,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it wasn't that much. I mean, when he did it, I kind of expected it to come because I knew money had to come from somewhere, and I wasn't freaking out over $10 million being restructured.
All right, Mason. So now that we have a lot of this Daniel Jones mumbo jumbo, as you'd like to say, out of the way, and this season, trash, right? 2024, done. So let's look forward to 2025, Mason. How did the Giants cap situation appear in 2025? What are your overall thoughts about it? How much dead cap overall are the Giants taking on because of some of these poor contractual decisions from the past?
So we got $22 million being added for Daniel Jones, right? We're walking into next season right now with 45 plus 19 from Jones gets us to 64.
Okay.
We've got the ability to make another, $30-40 million, give or take. I mean, I got to go back and look at the numbers now without Jones there. But we've got plenty of space to make plenty of contracts to make space with, right? The question that needs to be asked is, do they want to keep on restructuring Andrew Thomas or not, right? Because of his injury issues, right? Do you want to keep pushing money back or not? So that'll come into play. We have the ability, like I said, to restructure contracts, or we can, manipulate contracts and push money into the future. We're in a good position. We're not like where we were with when Gettleman left us, right? Where all those contracts, were hitting all at the same time, right? I mean, we went in when the cap was low, right? It's like, why? It was a mess. So, we're in a much better position right now. I mean, we've got the ability to, add a lot of people. I mean, $64 million in cap space in real terms. Like if you're thinking about, okay, the way I look at the cap is how much money do I really have to spend, including what I need to budget for this season, which is, give or take $10 million that I want to have ideally an operating room, right? My practice squad, which is about $5 million, so that's about $15 million, and about another $5 million for the draft class. So that $64 million turns into about 44 in real terms, right, of cap space. Now, in terms of contracts, you can probably get about 60-ish million in contracts, depending on how you structure them, how you put them out, how you make them work, right? Maybe more, So again, it's a shell game. It's like playing a game of Tetris, right?
Yeah. So if the Giants spend in free agency in 2025, it's safe to say the Giants are not going to have any 2026 compensatory picks because it looks like it's just Darius Slayton and Aziz.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, because those are the only two who may get contracts that may warrant it, but it looks like the Giants would offset that by their signings in 2025. Sure.
More than likely, yeah. The compensatory formula is one of the things that I just refuse to try and even learn about. I follow Nick Corte, and that's it.
Nick Corte, exactly. That's what I do.
I take his word on it.
And I do that as well. And it's going to be interesting to see if a team gets a comp pick for Daniel Jones, if they sign him now, and then we talked about at the top of the show, and then he becomes a free agent, signs a decent deal with some team. Now, I think from the standpoint of the Giants, from my vantage point, the only way I can see them doing some of the things you're talking about, Mason, restructuring Thomas, restructuring Burns, which I hope they don't do, but the only way I can see it is if they do make that decision to like sign a Sam Darnold, right? Like that would be the way. They need to create some cap space to get that contract on board. I have a feeling the Giants are headed in a different direction. I think they're going to maybe sign a bridge type quarterback, not at the level of a Darnold, and then draft somebody in this draft, in which case they're really getting to a healthy cap spot. That's how you get yourself to the healthiest of healthy cap spots at that point. I think that's the direction. I think
that's the salad, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not on the Darnold train at all. Like, I'm not on that. I'm more on the give me Jameis,
Right.
Give me Jameis for 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean?
Have Jameis on this team.
Jameis Winston.
I think he'd probably be about a $15 million a year deal. Somewhere in that range, maybe 20 million. But probably less depending on how they put it together. I think Darnold is. I want to see how Darnold plays the rest of the year, right? Because he started really hot and now he's kind of tailed off. Our team's finding out what they're doing, right? Are they finding out like what the limitations are? And I, kind of going back, we've had this discussion in the spaces a lot with regards to even Daniel Jones and the amount of criticism that we gave to Jason Garrett is, was Jason Garrett running stick out simple concepts the entire time because of Jones, right? Because we're now seeing that replicate itself with Dable, right?
Right.
So now as teams start to see what the Vikings are doing, right, with Sam Darnold, can they adjust and can he start overcoming potentially whatever his limitations are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great
I
point.
remember Dan said that geez, back in 2021, I think it was, Dan, you said, if I could get Jason Garrett alone in a room, and I was like, all right, creep. But then he was like, and give him some truth serum, I think he would be able to tell us all what he can't say. And it's that his offense is vanilla and limited because of Daniel Jones. Now, I would argue there's still other ways that you could make a quarterback like Daniel Jones work, as Brian Dable did in 2022. But I think there's something significant about that assertion that you put out there many years ago, Dan.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that with that caveat that, you can still as a coach do a better job than Garrett did. Now, something that's interesting to me on the Jameis front, he would probably be my top target as well, Mason. He's raised the overall NFL air yards. Since he's come into the league, he's only had like 3 games, right? By a half a yard. You know how hard that is to do? He's like throwing more air yards.
That's insane.
Yeah.
When you know how the math that gets into that, that's crazy to think that he's done that by half a yard.
Yeah. Through a 3-game sample size, it's almost impossible to do. But one other aspect with Jameis doesn't get talked about a lot because it's been such an important aspect for the Giants over the last 6 years. He helps your locker room. Everyone who plays with Jameis loves playing with Jameis. So if we want a leader back to kind of help our locker room culture, like it seems to be a huge thing for the Giants, employing Daniel Jones for this long, bring in Jameis. Jameis will help your locker room out. Will he throw some interceptions? Yeah, he's going to throw some interceptions and make some soup plays. Who cares? At least he's going to make this offense fun again. And he's going to help the development of players like Jalen Hyatt and players like Malik Neighbors. Jerry Jeudy was written off as a total bust, and now he's having 80, 90 yards a game with Jameis. And Cedric Tillman is looking good with Jameis. And Eli Moore, out of nowhere, is looking good with Jameis. He will help your wide receivers develop. He's going to be my top target as well, Mason, as the bridge quarterback, and I love that you brought him up.
Yeah, no, I think he'd be amazing to have on.
One more question I wanna pose to you before you get out of here, because Dan and I we spoke a lot about the benching, obviously, in the last episode, and there is one contractual element that Dan and I didn't touch on that I think factors into why Tommy DeVito is starting over Drew Lock. And I wanted you, because I saw you bring this up on Twitter. I thought it was an astute point by you, Mason, and it's the contract of Drew Lock. Do you think that factored in, because all the incentives he had, into his contract? Do you think that factored into one of the reasons why Tommy DeVito is out there? Now, I think it is also, before you get in that, I think it is because Drew Lock is not good with this offense too. I think if he was, he would be out there. But since he's not up to speed on this offense, it gave the Giants the reason to start Tommy DeVito over him without any question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I with regards to his contract, all of his incentives, if I'm reading them correctly, are all what we call not likely to be earned. So they wouldn't count this year if he hits them anyway. Okay. So this notion that Spotrac put out there that it would make sense for them to not play him because of those incentives is kind of hokey, right? Does that make sense? Because they're not incentives that he hit the prior year, right? So he didn't play 40% of the snaps the prior year in Seattle, and for him to hit 40% of the snaps now with only 7 games left, if I remember correctly.
Right.
That would be, number one, right? Okay, he might hit that, whatever. These aren't cap crushing numbers that could happen. And even if they applied right now, if they applied to this season, restructure, $1 million, move it into next year, and you're done, right? So it's 6 of one and a half dozen of the other to even worry about that, right? Contractually. So it doesn't make any sense to me that they would freak out about this when they have the ability to make the space, right? Now, with regards to the decision about doing it, let's call a spade a spade. Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito aren't good quarterbacks, period, right? As a general rule, right? Now, is there the possibility that DeVito in some magical world could end up becoming the next Tom Brady? Okay, sure. If you want to argue that point, let's, okay. But the reality is that, DeVito brings an element, in my opinion, that Lock doesn't. He can run the ball, right?
Yeah.
And we know that Dable likes to use the quarterback as an extension of his running game, right? He did that with Daniel Jones, and he did that with Josh Allen. Right. So using DeVito seems to make more sense because, that offsets some of his limitations. Right. And the question is to what degree, right? Versus, Drew Lock's limitations.
Yeah,
know?
I think there's a lot of factors, but the one thing is for sure, if Drew Lock was comfortable in this offense and the Giants had faith in Drew Lock, they would be putting Drew Lock out there. And it was never evident to me throughout all my time at training camp that Drew Lock had any comfortability in Brian Dable's offense, unfortunately. And the Giants were able to get something going in 2023 with Tommy DeVito. And also, Tommy DeVito seems to have a cult following in this area, and it will also sell some tickets.
Absolutely. But, I'm with you, Dan, on the, don't restructure Brian Burns. I didn't, I wasn't a huge fan of the trade. I'm never a fan of trading, cheap assets or cost controlled assets for expensive players, right? When you're in the window, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you're rebuilding, it doesn't really make sense to do. In fact, when I was on with Sal and Monty, before the season, I was saying sign Jonathan Grenard, as an option. Probably would have got, he was in that 22 million. I figured he was in that 20 to 23 million dollar range for an end instead of going with this massive deal for Brian Burns.
And that's another topic for another day, Mason.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could go 10, 15 minutes on that one. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this breakdown of the cap. This was really in-depth, and this is what we wanted. This is what we needed. I'm sure the listeners will also appreciate it. We will be calling on you again in the future because this was awesome. Thank you so much. Mason, why don't you let everybody know where they can find more of your work?
Oh, thanks, man. On Twitter, I'm on, at NYG Mason. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Happy to be on, and look forward to, seeing more of your work. All right.
Thanks, Mason, bro.
Take care, guys. Bye.
All right.
That was very informative and fun, right, Dan?
Yep. I'm in on that. We need that kind of information on this pod. The cap is a tricky thing. The compensatory pick formula, as Mason said himself, is a tricky thing. We both defer to Nick Corte on that one. But look, the Giants have a lot of ramifications. I'm with Mason on this one, Nick, as we wrap up here. I hope that they they've already proven they're going to rip the Band-Aid off on Jones. They're not pushing it into 2026. Let's do the same with the rest of these contracts. Yeah. We don't need to restructure Thomas. We don't need to restructure Burns. Let's restart this whole thing, flesh it out.
But if you restart it, and this is something else we've been talking about a lot recently, who is leading that start? It's probably going to be Shane.
Yeah.
Do you have faith in that? And who is his underling? Who is his coach? Who is managing the locker room? Is that Brian Daboll? I think that can be answered over the next 7 games.
And it will be answered.
And it will be answered.
7 games. And yeah, we'll have to see how it play out. To everybody else, thank you so much for tuning into the Big Blue Banter podcast. Keep it locked and loaded. We'll be back this weekend to recap the Giants game, though I know some of you don't care anymore, but at least we got a new quarterback in, so we'll see how that goes. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you soon.